So in the last lesson, we learned about simple interest, which is I equals P times R times T. And it was quite a bit of work to calculate simple interest. But unfortunately, simple interest is generally used only when things are short-term, and it's not often used by banks and loans. They actually use a more complicated formula called compound interest, which we're going to study in this lesson. To see how compound and simple interest are different, let's take a look at an example by first doing a calculation and then looking at the graph. So if you invest $100, so the principal is $100, and you make an interest rate of 50%, so that's 0.5, and you leave it in there for 1 year, you can calculate your simple interest, which is P times R times T. And the interest would be $100 times 0.5 times 1, which works out to be $50. So if you put in $100 into a bank account for 1 year, so that's what this piece represents, $100 for 1 year, you make $50 of interest. And you can go ahead and spend that on whatever you wish. Then in the next year, you leave the $100 in again, and the same thing happens. You make another $50. And third year going, you leave the $100 into the bank account, and again, at the end of the third year, you make $50. So just by setting the money in the bank account, you have made $150 of interest. And you still have the $100 that are in the bank account. Not bad, right? But how does that compare to compound interest? So what happens in compound interest is instead of you spending the $50, you start with the $100, you make your $50 just like in the last one, but instead of spending it, you put it back in the bank account, and so your bank account has now got $150. And then you're going to calculate the interest and leave it in. And it keeps growing and growing. And notice at the end of 3 years, you have $337.50. That's way more than the $250. So on simple interest in the last example, you had $150 of interest plus the $100 bank account, principal in the bank account, which is $250. In this compound interest example, you made $337.50 by the end. So compound interest is way better because you are making interest on your interest. So to recap here, compound interest is interest that is calculated on the principal, the money you originally put in, plus the interest you earn as you leave it in the bank account. You don't take the interest out. The longer you leave it in the bank account, the more you will make. And the formula is pretty complicated. And we're not actually going to use this formula. I just wanted to show you what it looked like. We're going to use online calculators that are provided by banks and investment companies to help us calculate compound interest.